So there's two things that midlife women have got to be aware of, and they have to make sure they're up on when they're going through this phase in life. And that is their blood sugar. Number one, blood sugar is going to greatly impact how the rest of your hormones are behaving. And then the rest of your hormones and how they're behaving is going to impact your blood sugar. So we have to watch this. The other thing is as we start to go through menopause, we tend to become insulin resistant without changing anything in our diet. And so our blood sugar becomes unstable. The other thing that I see women that is just a must, like you can't get away from this, and that is detoxification. We've got to detox, we've got to watch our toxic levels, whether it's heavy metals or just how we simply naturally detoxify because of our genetics. So we do things like the Dutch test in our practice because we want to see how are you breaking down these hormones both in phase 1 detoxification as well as phase 2. And there is some supplements that can really assist with this and assist with how your body's going to break down that estrogen replacement therapy or your own estrogen that's being produced. Well, I found a product recently that highlights just exactly both of these things. One, detoxification, and the other with blood sugar. And that is with two components, one being berberine and the other being broccoli seed extract and sulforaphane. And so I've asked the one of the company owners to come speak with us today about these two ingredients in their products and just how much they differ from other products, and what they can do for us and our health. So David Roberts is here today, and he holds an MPH from Johns Hopkins, a master's in BME from the UVA, and a bachelor's in EE, a lot of abbreviations here, and BME from Duke. David has more than 20 years of public health experience on 3 continents. In 2014, David co-founded the gut supplement Restore Now Ion. So welcome, David. That's a lot. Like, what are all these BMEs and VAs and EEs stand
Yeah,
for?
I think I read it out, and your producer may have shortened them. But Karen, thank you so much
Okay.
for having me on. I really appreciate it. I'm glad to be here.
That's great. We were just talking before this, and you were saying like, "Oh, I'm not the estrogen expert, but I know that these two components, both berberine and sulforaphane, are so important for
Yeah,
estrogen and the effects that the estrogen loss has on our body, being that it affects our blood sugar, and then the metabolism of estrogen and how much it relies on sulforaphane and what it can give us. So I think I would like to start with sulforaphane because
yeah,
that's a big one. And I think there's so much confusion around, what is sulforaphane compared to broccoli seed extract and D-indole methane? Because a lot of people are very familiar with D-indole
oh yeah,
methane, and it's like, what are these two different things? Are they coming from the same component? So explain what sulforaphane is and how it differs from those things.
yeah. So sulforaphane is derived the good chemical that's derived from broccoli, and basically, in let's say you have a head of broccoli, you have the precursor molecule called glucoraphanin, which is stable. It's in that head of broccoli, and then you start chewing that head of broccoli, and you break the cell wall down. And once you open that cell wall, it releases an enzyme called myrosinase, which has a chemical reaction with the glucoraphanin that makes sulforaphane. You swallow it, you get the benefit. Now, the issue is that if you try to harness it, save that sulforaphane, historically it degrades. And so that's why people grow broccoli sprouts, which are known to have 50 to 100 times more of this good chemical sulforaphane um, than mature broccoli. And so we got introduced to this back in 2012 when my wife Maura was diagnosed with breast cancer. And so we ended up growing her cells in our lab, and sulforaphane was number three indirectly killing her type of breast cancer. And so when I went out
Wow.
to buy it, I found the only thing we could find was these glucoraphanin products. In fact, we actually, if the glucoraphanin on the labels of these broccoli supplements, it's called sulforaphane glucosinolate, which can be utterly confusing to consumers because it sounds like it's sulforaphane, but it's not. It's what comes before sulforaphane. And so we
Okay.
actually had bought some of these precursor products, these glucoraphanin products, and I read all these amazing. There are 2,000 research papers on sulforaphane, and there just sounds like a fantastic molecule. And I'm like, Maura, have you seen? Do you feel any difference? And she's like, I don't. And so I dug a little deeper, and sure enough, she was taking the glucoraphanin product, which the supplement companies say if you swallow it, your gut bacteria can convert some of it to sulforaphane. Some of the supplements also throw some myrosinase, that enzyme, in there. None of it really works to get you a level of sulforaphane in your blood in order to move the needle on the biology, which is the NRF2 pathway. And so that's why fast forward my friend John Gilday, who he grew her Mars cells in our lab. And 3 years later, he comes to us and is like, we stabilize sulforaphane, or I think I stabilized sulforaphane. So we sent it off to a third-party lab. Sure enough, he had. And so at that time, we were with, as you mentioned, Restore. And so we weren't looking to bring another product to market, but Maura she's like, we got to get this out there because she knew the research and knew it was a game changer in people's health and women's health too. And so she raised the seed money, but ended up take a turn for the worse, and she ended up passing in 2017. And so after that, we started more labs in her memory,
Aw.
and to get this and the other products like the Berberine out to to people who need it. So
Yeah. Do you tend to market it towards women?
um, no,
No, yeah, because I would
we
think it'd be
don't.
really good for men too. We're seeing this
Yeah.
rise in estrogen in men and like blood glucose problems with them too, right?
Yeah, one of our competitors, it's a chemically derived, so they use chemical solvents to extract and stabilize the sulforaphane. It's out of France. It's called prostophane. They target that one specifically to
To
men with
men.
prostate
Yeah.
issues.
Okay.
And so, but it's actually, it has 39 pro-health mechanisms. We usually just talk about a handful of them, so it doesn't sound like snake oil. But yeah, basically we talk about detoxification, like you mentioned. We talk about brain health, so stimulated brain-derived neurotropic factor, and then we also talk about inflammation, and so those are cross genders. Those are all on both sides. Both genders
Yeah.
struggle with those
Yeah.
and
So
need.
how does it help with the detoxification and which
Yeah,
pathways?
yeah. Um, so sulforaphane is the best molecule at turning on this protein called NRF2. So NRF2 is in the cell. It's bound. Its natural state is being bound to this complex. And when sulforaphane comes along, gets into the cell, it releases and goes into the nucleus. And there, it actually turns on a bunch of different genes. And some of those genes are these detoxification genes. And so these phase 2 detoxifier genes, it actually does work in all three phases. And so, basically it's how do you, the toxins in your system, how do you make it less toxic? How do you make it more water soluble so it's in the blood? And then how do you bind it? Phase 3, how do you bind it and excrete it? And
Yeah.
so it works in every phase, which there are not a lot of molecules that do all three.
No, there it really isn't. And so it's going to bind to it and pull it out, but as
Yeah,
well, it's going to help your body to release it and carry it out, like turn it water soluble so your body can get rid of it.
that's correct. Yeah,
Ah,
and so it works in well, one of my favorite studies is Hopkins did a study in one of the I forget what Chinese city, but there are a lot of these cities and municipalities that have a lot of pollution. Where you walk out and you get black snot if you're out for 15 minutes. And so a lot of these people had air pollution, were breathing in air pollutants. And so they gave them these broccoli sprout beverages high, and they had measured how much sulforaphane was in there. And sure enough, and then they collected their urine, and the urine was chock full of toxins, and so that they could measure, including like benzene. And so, that's a great study, but it does work with metals, including mercury. I just tell people, if you're interested in seeing if sulforaphane does something that you're interested in, just go to pubmed.gov, type in sulforaphane and whatever,
Yeah.
and see if something pops up.
So how does it differ then from D-indole methane?
Yeah, so DIM
Yeah.
is derived from the cruciferous vegetables as well. It's so basically you have the precursor molecules that are stable in the cruciferous vegetables. So every cruciferous vegetable has its own flavor, so its own type. So watercress has what's called PEITC. These ITC stands for isothiocyanates. The precursor molecule are called glucosinolates. And so you take the myrosinase enzyme, it cleaves the glucose off the glucosinolates, and then it makes the active, the good form, which is what sulforaphane is, which is called an isothiocyanate. So cabbage has one, broccoli, of course, has sulforaphane, watercress has the PEITC, cauliflower, kale. So they all have different potpourri. They don't just have one. So broccoli has six, so five others outside of sulforaphane. And so those are in seeds and sprouts. Now, when you come to the adult broccoli, that's where you get DIM, which degrades from the isothiocyanate down into, I think, I3C and then to DIM. So those are
Yeah.
through a reaction. So DIM, of course, is best known for what it does with hormones, and
Mhm.
improved it specifically with I think breast cancer. We don't sell them, so I can talk about disease states. Um, and but yeah, you can find DIM in the mature broccoli, where it's not necessarily in the broccoli sprout. But I think one study. I'm not a DIM expert, but I remember one study, like there are a couple of breast cancer studies where they looked at DIM at high risk populations and found an improvement in, I think, the two
Yeah.
hydroxyestrone versus the 16 alpha hydroxyestrone. So that ratio improved basically. And
Mhm.
so there are numerous studies on DIM out there. But DIM, they're related, and they both come from the cruciferous family, but they're different molecules with
Different
different.
molecules, different mechanisms.
Yeah.
Okay. Because DIM, it's so great for exactly what you were saying. You are correct with that. Like it does help us move away from the more toxic pathways like 4-hydroxylation and 16-hydroxylation, and it'll help your body to push down the safer pathway, which is 2-hydroxylation. The problem is with DIM, we see it actually lowering estrogen, which is great if you've got estrogen dominance and you really have an excess of estrogen in your system and you're, in your fertile years and you're pushing down one of those pathways that you don't want to be pushing down so heavily. It works amazing.
Yeah.
But in menopausal women and perimenopausal women that are losing their estrogen and you put DIM in, it can actually make their estrogen go faster, which we don't want,
Yeah.
because then we start running into all these problems. Rather, sulforaphane, I couldn't really find, like I tried to see, okay, does sulforaphane, is this going to act the same way? Is it going to lower estrogen? And I can't seem to find anything that says it does.
Yeah, no, I would say there, of course, there are different estrogens, as you know. So I'd say it helps with um, maybe lowering or blocking the bad estrogen or estrogens. What for the good estrogens, the we were talking about IL-6, um,
Mhm.
and
Interleukin
Leukin
6.
6, yeah, and how that can affect um, the sensitivity of estrogen receptors on the cells. And so with sulforaphane uh, being so good at downregulating IL-6, it in turn helps with the improving estrogen sensitivity of the receptors.
Oh,
Uh,
interesting.
so there are not a whole lot of papers for years and years. I'm like, it doesn't do anything with estrogen. And then I think there's one kind of population study that shows that it's good in general. And then there are two other papers that talk more about the science. But there, of all the papers, all the 2,000 papers on sulforaphane, I think only three are related to
The
estrogen.
estrogen, which is ridiculous considering that that's what you found to be, you said, the third most effective at killing her breast cancer cells.
Yeah, I mean, in that scenario, so hers was estrogen positive,
Yeah.
uh, and but with a mechanism there, I'm not exactly sure because we didn't figure out exactly what
What
the
was
mechanism
happening?
was, but typically, cancer cells in general are cells that lose their way, and so one of the benefits of sulforaphane in general is it helps with senescence and it helps with autophagy. So basically, old cells showing them the way out, and that probably is similar with cancer cells and apoptosis. But again, with her specific kind of cancer, we did not drill down to look at the mechanism.
Mm-hmm. If it does help to reduce inflammation, and when we have higher amounts of inflammation, we'll tend to produce more of what people call the bad estrogen. There's good to all the estrogens, just so everybody knows, but estrone is the more inflammatory one that is considered the bad estrogen. And we tend to produce more estrone in perimenopause and menopause a lot of the time. As our estradiol drops, we can produce estrone from our fat cells, which is more inflammatory, which can cause the inflammation. So if it's working on inflammation pathways, that could have something to do with why it can be beneficial at helping with breast cancer, because there is an inflammatory component to that, and estrone is more proliferative, and so it is more tied to breast cancer. So that could be why, I think. And then the fact that it does help with all three phases of detoxification. Of course, we really want to be metabolizing these estrogens properly. So it would impact, how does your body get rid of the estrogens that it's producing or taking in?
Yeah.
So I would think that there's quite a few things. And I think this was on your guys' website. It does help with blood sugar regulation.
Yeah, in fact, that's the one it does. The one that yeah, I'd say that the sulforaphane would do that more over time. The one that the berberine that you mentioned at the
Mm-hmm.
beginning, that actually is even different than regular berberine. So this is a bioavailable form of berberine that we offer. And so regular berberine can actually impact blood sugar levels or blood glucose levels over the span of like about 30 days, is what it says in the literature. And so what we've shown in internal studies is looking at basically one study in particular we did was we would eat dinner, um, not eat overnight, skip breakfast, take two berbolites, and you would be in a light ketosis by noon. And so take the two berbolites around 7 a.m. And by 12, that your ketones have elevated, so you can measure them, and then your blood glucose has dipped some.
So in comparison to somebody that didn't take it, the Burb Elite, that
Where
they didn't go into ketosis.
where people who did not take berberine or just take regular berberine, basically no measurable ketone levels and no
Oh,
shift
wow.
in blood glucose.
And why is that? Like, is it because
Yeah,
it's just
so
more absorbable?
exactly. Yeah, so basically, regular berberine actually has been measured, has a 0.6% bioavailability. So it's
Wow.
very low. So basically, take 1,000 milligrams, you get 6 milligrams in, and that's not enough to really do anything with. And so with ours, we've shown that enough gets through that it does consistently lower blood glucose, impact the blood glucose
And
levels.
you guys, why do you combine it with the broccoli seed? Is that because they work well together or?
Yeah, they do work well together actually, but we do that. So we have two ways we get these what we call lipid soluble or fat soluble phytochemicals through the gut barrier. One is to combine it with the broccoli seed extract that we make for the broccoli, and that has some sulforaphane in it. Um, and then the other is the other technology, which is in our curcumin product and our resveratrol product. We actually create a unique molecule that we have a patent pending on, where we take a plant-based protein and we attach a sea-based carbohydrate to it, and and then once we have that molecule, then we attach the phytonutrients. So um, we don't do this for berberine because currently we're set up we're tiny. We're like a microbrewery of supplements.
Yeah.
So it's the yeah. So since we don't have capacity to do all the supplements that way, we do the combination and it works very well. So
Yeah. Oh, great. Yeah. I mean, I was super excited to see that it was combined together, those two things.
yes,
I'm like, what? This is so amazing.
yeah,
Like we're getting on so many different pathways that are so important for women and their hormones. And
yeah,
so I think combining it into one product is great. Berberine is probably one of the most common supplements that I recommend because we see so much insulin resistance and cholesterol going up, and berberine can really really help with that. So
yeah.
I think it's important that women know that most berberine supplements are not very bioavailable and that you have to be really careful.
Yeah, yeah. Um, one of my favorite studies on berberine is it's a sleep study. So basically, when we released berberine as a product. It was early years with it, and I basically surveyed the people who had bought it or were subscribers, and basically it was like, why, tell me what you like about why do you keep ordering it, thinking that they would come back and say ketosis, blood sugar. 75% of them said sleep helps me sleep. In fact, we ran out. We basically there was a berberine shortage. We don't make our own berberine. We buy it, and we couldn't find it. And there was like this mild panic within the people. Once I sent the email out, like, hey, things are going to be your order is going to be delayed. I'm like, that's really strange. Like people are like, you know, it wasn't a normal like response. It was more like a panic. And I'm like,
Yeah.
and so it's because of people who, um, have historically had sleep issues or have been taking berberine. So there's a study. So I just go straight to PubMed. I'm like, what is this? And so the study that really stood out was how berberine um, was better than Valium as a sleep aid.
No.
Yeah, yeah. And this was a mouse
Why?
study. Um, so yeah, and it said in the paper, so basically it increases serotonin 30%. And this is just regular berberine, it's not even ours. So it happens in the gut, and it increases dopamine 25%. In a different study that I found, it actually showed that it increases what's that? Blanking the love molecule that when
Oxytocin?
oxytocin,
No
15%.
way.
Yeah. So that's why those are, and I think it has, you know, when you there is the blood glucose late, like if you eat late, right? If you eat a sugary meal, high carbohydrate meal after and you know your melatonin's been started produced been being produced, that melatonin production arrests your insulin production. And so the sugar or the carbs in your blood or whatever, it's going to stay there overnight, and that's pro-inflammatory. It doesn't make you feel that good. Taking berberine actually can help process that, and so it doesn't sit there overnight. And so I think that's also a difference in helping people sleep. In
And I
my
would think too, like just stabilizing blood sugar in general, because people will wake up because their blood sugar will come down in the nighttime and that wakes them up. So if you
Yeah,
can get a more stable blood sugar through the help of berberine, then it could probably help with sleep
hopefully
that way
sleep.
too.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and how does berberine work for cholesterol? Because I know that it can help to lower cholesterol. Is that through the action of what it's doing on blood sugar, or does it have an independent action on lipids?
Yeah, I don't know the mechanism actually, and that
Yeah.
you asked
Okay.
me. You
I
asked me
don't
to,
know either. I feel like I should know. And I'm like,
um,
dang.
I do know that it's yeah, going to be careful about talking about disease states, but we can talk after afterwards. Um, so anyway, I don't know about cholesterol, but there is a body of literature on berberine and cholesterol, and I'm sure
Okay.
the mechanism is in there.
I
And
mean, it could just be from lowering blood sugar. That would make sense, but I think there's another mechanism of action on it.
yeah.
But we'll have to find out. We'll hit the research up and figure it out. Back to sulforaphane. When I was researching for today's podcast, I did find actually quite a bit of information just on its effects on estrogen and the menopausal symptoms. And it actually, one research showed that women with higher intakes of sulforaphane reported fewer menopausal symptoms. And I think that that would just be because of its help with detoxification of different things. But I guess you don't know either because you're not up on the estrogen piece.
And this was the berberine,
No, that was sulforaphane.
sulforaphane. Yeah, I know I have not read that paper or seen that research.
Yeah.
So really interesting.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it should be in menopausal supplements then. That's what I think. If it's helping with our symptoms of menopause, then. But I know even hot flashes can be from blood sugar issues. And so maybe it has something to do with how it helps with your insulin. Who knows? That it also, because it helps with phase 2 detoxification, it promotes the healthy detoxification and removal of excess and unsafe forms of estrogen by assisting the liver and the gut in eliminating them. So that's kind of what you talked about before, like it's helping with all different phases of
Yeah.
detoxification. Um, and I also that it can help protect bone loss. Have you read that?
Oh yeah, that's big. Yeah. So but the balancing of the osteoblasts, osteoclasts. Yeah. In fact, you know, my um, Mara actually had um, cancer in her hips that it spread, right?
Yeah.
And they did some radiation on the killed the cancer, but then she had basically Swiss cheese hips, and it was just incredible. I mean, it was I had a stack, but the sulforaphane with at the time it was through broccoli sprouting was a key part of that. Fast forward, my youngest son broke his leg, same deal. He healed like yeah, they healed quick already, but he healed about 2 weeks more quickly because of the stack, which included broccoli that I gave him. So yeah, it definitely is really, really, really good for bone density, bone health.
Well, some women, they're just not able to take estrogen because they might have a history of breast cancer. And we know that women that don't replace their estrogen in menopause have a massively higher risk of developing osteoarthritis,
Yeah.
osteoporosis. So, knowing that there's something that can help with the building of bones, I think is really important for those women that can't take estrogen replacements, or even testosterone or progesterone replacement can help with bone formation. So I think that that's a good one to include in somebody's repertoire of supplements if they're unable to take it. So,
Yeah, and we have a blog. I talk more about the stack that I recommend for for that reason, for just bone in general, but specifically for women. Like my mother is in her 80s, and it's funny, they have a she measures the boys on the wall, with the pencil as they're
mhm.
growing. They started measuring her as she's shrinking,
Oh,
which is not funny, but it's like, but yeah, it's a big deal, and it's real. So,
what's that stack? What do you recommend?
so I'd say, I recommend the gut supplement that we used to be a part of. It's co-founded. It's now called Ion. I recommend some sort of, you know calcium supplement, like a bone supplement. But really, actually, you don't even need a supplement. Just take bone broth. Bone broth has everything you need.
Mhm.
So drinking bone broth. And then there's a supplement called Ostenol, Ostinol, which is it's fantastic. If I could, I would buy the supplement company because it's that
Mhm.
good.
Wow.
So, but yeah, that's the stack.
Okay, good. Good to know. And what about its effects on brain health? Another thing that deteriorates with women in menopause.
Yes, no, it's a big deal. In fact, it's a growing. I mean, where people are as or more afraid of having cognitive issues than
Yeah.
cancer, right?
Yep.
And so, and so, yeah, I mean, basically, sulforaphane upregulates something called brain-derived neurotrophic factor. You get that also from exercise. But basically, BDNF is at the center of brain health. And so there's a whole um, body of literature on various brain-related issues and sulforaphane. And so basically, sulforaphane um, stimulated brain-derived neurotrophic factor. It's really good at the BDNF protects existing neurons, but it also helps grow new neurons, which is something, when I was going through science school, and that we didn't think was possible, but it is possible. And so, I about 25% of the people who take our supplement, take broccoli, they can know that the BDNF is working and that they'll have vivid dreams at night. So
Um,
that's the BDNF. When early on in the company, I was doing everything, including customer service. And so we have a unconditional, like 100-day, no questions asked, um, refund policy, except I typically would ask one question. And people would be like, this doesn't work. It didn't work for me. I'm like, sure, you can have your money back. But did you happen to have any vivid dreams? And, maybe again, 25% of the people would be like, no way. That was from that was from broccoli. So anyway, that's one of the
showing that it's
benefits.
working.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. And yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say it does cross the blood-brain barrier.
Okay.
So sulforaphane is one of those. It's really not unique, but it's both water soluble and fat soluble, and so
Mm,
it can cross the blood-brain barrier, and it's directly uh, it impacts neuroinflammation. So that's another
wow.
pro cognitive function
Yeah.
benefit.
And it can also affect can help to detoxify glyphosate.
Yeah, so that's one of the bodies of research we've done internally was looking at glyphosate because it's everywhere, right? Uh,
Yeah.
and so looking at like you go out, some food you eat, processed food, if you go out to a fast food restaurant, maybe it has no glyphosate, maybe it has, a decent amount. And for the restaurants and the places you eat that have sort of on the higher level that you can still get um, from eating one meal, like what does that do to your biology? And so we looked at NRF2, so that pathway that's really central to health, where if you don't have it, you die. If it's depressed, you feel really bad. And so saw that NRF2 glyphosate decreased NRF2 30%. So that may or may not sound like a lot, but that's for
I think
NRF2,
it sounds a
that's a
lot.
lot. Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
lot. And so, people will think about detox being in the liver. Yes, the liver does detox, but really every cell in your body does detox. And
Yeah.
so, if you think about it, if NRF2 being sort of central to phase two detox, if that's turned down by 30%, basically it cannot, that detox mechanism in every cell is suppressed. And so one of the anti-glyphosate gurus, Jeffrey Smith, we were talking and he called it, you know, um, the mother of all toxins, right? Because it's basically making every toxin that much more toxic because you can't get rid of it. And so if that was our research, we looked at that, but we also put sulforaphane on those same cells to see if there was a reversal. And indeed, basically, if you took sulforaphane, that 30%, it went back to baseline, basically. So there was an improvement in that NRF2 level. And then we also looked at what are called tight junctions. So your body is your gut barrier has these tight junctions running along them, and it's basically a smart barrier. It lets things that should get through, and then blocks things that shouldn't go through. And so with leaky gut, you've heard of leaky gut. That's
Yep.
where this barrier is not functioning properly. And so that can happen from glyphosate, it can happen from gluten, it can happen from alcohol consumption. So just different things that can impair your tight junction function. And so we showed that basically glyphosate disrupted that tight junction function, and then broccoli restored it essentially, and actually not just restored it but improved it.
Wow.
Um, and so that was another body of research. And then the last thing we looked at was what are called gap junctions. So every cell in your body is connected. We're interconnected. We're not just individual cells. We're not just, your um, toe is functionally connected to your brain. Everything
Hmm.
works together. We're functionally coupled. We're not just, and so it's like, if you think about it, if you cut your hand and you have this gash, and you start taking care of it, eventually that gash heals. So how does your body know to regrow that skin in that way? Like that's this communication network of gap junctions of every cell in that area talking to it one another, telling it how to remodel. And so glyphosate basically depresses that communication in the gap
Wow.
junctions. And so that's a big thing. And if you think about what we talked about earlier as didn't look at, we haven't done research on glyphosate in cancer, but but there is research on loss of communication amongst cells and cancer. And so when you think about cells not being able to communicate, that's essentially what cancer is.
Hmm.
So anyway, we looked at putting broccoli on those uh, gap junctions in the cells and saw that communication was restored. So,
Wow.
so yeah, those are the three different ways we looked at how glyphosate can really impact, your health, and where the sulforaphane in broccoli specifically can really be protective and restorative.
Yeah. Now you've got two, we've got Berbolete, but then you've got the
Yes.
Brocco. Does somebody need to take both, or can they, if they wanted the Berberine and the broccoli, they would just take Berbolete, or is it a different ratio or different, amount in the
Yes.
Berb?
So that's a very good question. So basically, we measure and guarantee 5 milligrams of sulforaphane in every capsule for broccoli. Usually it's more because, while it's stable, it's not stable forever. And so we want to give it, a long shelf life. And so we'll put a little bit more on in there to extend this shelf life of the broccoli. But then the berbolete, so again, the purpose of sulforaphane and broccoli is it's enough to turn on the NF2 pathway.
Mhm.
Uh, Berberine and the berbolete, the sulforaphane in the broccoli seed complex or the broccoli seed extract there is to make the berberine bioavailable. So it's
Right.
not necessarily, while it could turn on NRF2, we're not saying we put enough sulforaphane in the berbolete to do that. So that's so yeah, the again, to summarize, broccoli,
Mhm.
we have the sulforaphane amounts that has turn on the NRF2 pathway, whereas the amount of sulforaphane in the broccoli seed complex is just enough to get the berberine through the gut barrier in
Okay.
a biologically relevant way.
Okay. So I'm gonna have to get some Berbolete because I mean the broccoli one because I just have the Berbolete and I want the Vex of both.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's great. And then we've got a coupon code for all of the listeners. Of course, it's KM15, and you guys can get 15% off. And then, as David said, there is a money back guarantee.
Yeah, 100-day, 100%, no questions asked, money back guarantee. So, but basically, we want to encourage people to try it and
Hmm.
not feel like they're going to be stuck. So, yeah,
Yeah, that's great. Well, I'm so happy to have something to recommend now to people that I know is going to actually be absorbed
yeah,
properly.
it's a big deal for sure. Yeah,
Yeah, and then it can help with sleep. I think that that's so incredible. And you actually recommend taking it at bedtime, hey?
I do. Yes.
Yeah, yeah,
One final study I want to talk about.
yeah.
So amazing with berberine is a longevity study. So looking at basically they had this population of rats that they aged by giving them chemotherapy, and
Okay.
and then they gave half of the mice berberine, the half didn't get berberine, and the ones that got berberine lived 80% longer.
Really?
Yeah. So
Wow.
that's like that's massive, right?
That's
And
huge.
and so we think that there is they didn't give a mechanism, but we think given how much um, chemotherapy can cause you know uh, senolytic cells, and
Um,
we were thinking that that may be the cause where it impacts the senescent cells.
which are zombie cells that need to
Zombie
go.
cells that need to be shunned the door. Yes.
Yeah. Time to go.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is, it's so important. We always focus on the outward things to help us stop from the aging process, right? We put the creams on and the Botox or whatever women are tending to use these days. It's so vast. But we never think about what's going on the inside in that sense of the senescent cells or things that are going to, help with our telomeres and the biological aging process. And we really need to focus on those things because I think that that has so much more power, so much more power compared to the topical stuff that we do,
Yes. Yeah.
right? And that's going to keep you looking younger and feeling younger, is what's going on the inside.
Yeah. And along those lines, the there's a big movement to supplement with glutathione, and a lot of those supplements don't really get into the cells, right?
Mm-mm.
And so, one of the enzymes that sulforaphane turns on. In fact, there's what we didn't talk about is it turns on, something called the antioxidant response element. So NRF2 turns on 200 different distinct antioxidant genes, and one of those is a series of it's like glutathione as transferases, which basically can create intracellular glutathione. Um,
Okay.
and so that's a big deal for sure.
Yeah, I have some genetic SNP too that makes it so something about the glutathione transferase, it affects it somehow. So this could be good for that. I can't remember exactly what it was, but it has something to do with that genetic SNP. Like I was
Interesting.
missing it or something.
Yeah.
But that I didn't do great with taking glutathione. Like it was like you should be taking things that help you produce
Make
it,
it.
like
Yeah.
N-acetylcysteine and now this sulforaphane.
Yeah. In fact, if you've heard of GlyNAC, the studies, glycine with NAC.
No, I
So
haven't.
basically, there are two anti-aging studies. There's one, and then they did one. The same group did it a couple years later. The same study, kind of a further looking into it. But yeah, it's they gave. I think there's people in their 70s, and they looked at a bunch of different aging markers, and they gave them, it was 8 grams of glycine, which is amino acid, and then 8 grams of NAC over the course of, I think it was 16 weeks. And just the amount of, it's phenomenal amount of kind of decrease in aging markers for that population. And so we haven't shown it, but we make our own GlyNAC here internally because a lot of the supplements have fillers, right? And so if you're taking that
Yes.
much, I think I was taking 30, trying to get that. There's 16 grams, and I was taking 36 capsules of these big guys. And so we don't use filler and or flow agents in any of our capsules, for so we can get it, stuff as much of the good stuff in there as we can. And so I'm gonna tell our guys, I'm like, can you, I need you to make me this, without filler. And so it went from 36 capsules to 21 capsules.
Okay.
So
But you're not selling that one yet.
we're not selling it, but I mean, the only value, we try to sell things where we bring up substantial value add. The only value would be that there's no filler.
Right.
But I can send you some if you want.
Okay.
I'll send you
But
a
I don't
big.
want to have to take 20 something pills.
Well, actually, that's thank you. That was the point. With that, so John Gilday, who's the brains of the operation, he has a theory, we haven't proven it, that since um, sulforaphane turns on glutathione,
Yes.
and these are basically the building blocks. Glycine and NAC are the building blocks for glutathione. You can take substantially less to
Okay.
and get
As
the
long as you're
glutathione.
taking sulforaphane.
Correct. Yeah,
Got
that's the
it.
theory. We haven't proven it yet.
Okay. I
Yeah.
like that theory. I'll
It's,
take it. I'll
it makes
believe it.
sense. Yeah, it makes sense.
Placebo effect, if anything.
Yeah,
So I don't have to
right.
take 23, 21 pills or whatever, 26 pills.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
very interesting. Well, I love the information on these products because, like I said, it's some of the things that I really highlight for women in midlife. And so I think it's great that we've got a product now that we can recommend, and you've given us the science behind it and how well it's being delivered into the system, which I think is super important when you're trying to choose which supplement. I tell people all the time, it's not about cost. Like, don't waste your money on some cheap berberine that you're going to find online. You want to know that it's actually working and it's being, it's bioavailable to your system.
Yes, absolutely.
So I appreciate it. I'll link to everything in the show notes, ladies. And if you'd like to try it, Remember, there's 100-day, return on them if you don't find that they're working. And then also we've got a coupon code for KM15 and you can get 15% off. So you can try out the Berbolete and the Broco. Is it Broco Elite too? Is that the name?
It's, yeah, a Brock Elite.
Broc Elite. Okay, got
Yes.
it.
Yes.
Berbolete and Broc Elite. Okay, I like it. Thank you, David, so much for coming on the show. I've really appreciated your knowledge.
Karen, thanks so much for having me. It's been a delight.